of information is an extension of freedom of speech, a fundamental human right recognized in international law, which is today understood more generally as freedom of expression in any medium, be it orally, in writing, through the internet, or through art forms. This means that the protection of freedom of speech as a right includes not only the content but also the means of expression. Freedom of information also refers to right to privacy in the content of the internet and information technology. As with the right to freedom of expression, the right to privacy is a recognized human right, and freedom of information acts as an extension to this right. Lastly, freedom of information can include opposition to patents, opposition to copyrights, or opposition to intellectual property in general. As you can see, these issues have sparked numerous debates among the people in Malaysia. During the general election on the 9th of May 2018, Malaysia opposition Pakatan Harapan pulled off a shocking election win. The opposition alliance led by Malaysia's former ruler Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad has won a majority in parliament. The election race was one of the most closely contested in Malaysia's history, with 92 years old Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad coming out of retirement to take on the former Prime Minister Dato Sri Najib, who has been embroiled in a massive corruption scandal. During the first meeting of the Pakatan Harapan coalition, Member of Parliament Nuri Izzah Anwar told the reporters that we are now in an era where truth is being celebrated by everyone. Besides, she mentioned that fair criticism is allowed to contribute to the development of the country. Meanwhile, PKR Secretary General Dato Saifuddin said that the media should be seen as an important element, particularly as a check and balance. He also mentioned that whatever commitment or for reform that they have expressed to the public must be implemented for people to see in a multiracial country. Responsible media institutions must be seen as an important component. Therefore, Pakatan Harapan government is now committed to implementing the Freedom of Information Act in line with its election manifesto. Nuri Izzah Anwar pledged that the law will be formulated in Parliament. This is due to the fact that the Parliament has to be a strong arm to check the excesses of executive. There are plans for bipartisan special select committees to be set up to vet and approve bills before they are tabled in Parliament. So far, there are only two states, namely Penang and Selangor, having enforced the enactment of the Freedom of Information in 2010 and 2011. On 16th of August 2018, the Pakatan-led government repealed the Anti-Fake News Act in Dewan Rakyat. Nuri Izzah Anwar explained that the government has to abolish the law because not only does it go against the principle of media freedom, but it is also said as a badly drafted law. She said Pakatan, which was the opposition when the law was passed, was concerned over the wide and vague definition of fake news. It will be decided by the judge, which can be problematic. The problem that arises here is who gets to define or control the definition of fake news. In Malaysia, it is fine to criticize an elected government so they will be answerable to the people. A certain degree of criticism is needed so that the government can live up to their responsibilities. They also mentioned that a law cannot be enacted just to protect those in powers. For a very long time, the press in Malaysia has been worried of writing any news that will criticize the then government too much that there were heavily restrictive law in place could bring the axe down on these printed publications. One such law is that the Printing, Press and Publication Act 1984 that has received criticisms for curtailing the freedom of speech. Although the legislation was meant to retain the genuine news, it has been said that it restricts political discourse, silences political opponents, and manipulates the news delivered to consumers. This law does not cover electronic publications at the moment, but the Anti-Fake News Act has taken care of that. However, Nuri Izzah Anwar is now working on abolishing the Press and Publications Act and said that she will set up a media council to make this happen. In 2010, she signed a bill to abolish the Press and Publication Act and to institute a media council. It has been her commitment to ensure that the media is free and fair in this country. After the brief introduction of Freedom of Information Act, let's move on to today's debate. The motion for today's debate is the benefit of implementing Freedom of Information Act outweighs the disadvantages. On my right is side opposition comprising of Deputy Opposition Leader and Opposition Leader, while on my left is side government comprising of Deputy Prime Minister and Prime Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The government side strongly agrees with the motions of today's debate. As the Prime Minister, I will justify 3 reasons for FOIA to be implemented, and my Deputy Prime Minister will further elaborate on the advantages of FOIA. I will start off my speech with a very famous quote from John F. Kennedy. A nation that is afraid of letting its people to judge the truth and falsehood in an open market is afraid of its people, which leads to my first argument, which is FOIA is needed because we see there's a need of openness and transparency in those who hold power. FOIA is proposed in line with the new manifesto of the new government in Malaysia. It is given greater attention than before. It aims to hold public servants and the executive accountable. Furthermore, this would increase public confidence in the government, and transparency between the government and society should be the norm, and restriction to certain information should be reasonably exercised.
POI, please.
Yes.
So, is the Prime Minister saying that the public will be able to access to all the information?
Ladies and gentlemen, by implementing FOIA doesn't mean that the government has to disclose everything. There's a certain limitation to the information that's going to be exposed. If we see from an international perspective, Denmark, being a democratic nation and a historic pioneer in the field of freedom of information, enacted Access to Public Administration Files 1985 Act to limit the granting of access to certain information related to national security and defense. Now, moving on to my second argument, which is FOIA is needed to sustain the state of democracy. Since 1957, Malaysia declared itself as a democratic union, and we see that freedom of information is vital to democracy. It is important to understand that public bodies do not hold information on their behalf, but for the benefit of the public. This is the foundation of democracy. It ensures that people, they know what the government is doing at all times. So, moving on to my last argument, which is FOIA is needed to fill in the gaps and loopholes in certain existing acts. As we know, according to the minister from the Prime Minister Department, Liu Hui-tiong, he said that FOIA is enacted with the desire of the government to review certain acts such as the Official Secrets Act 1972, which is the OSA. So what's wrong with the acts? Any government official that can decide what the people can or cannot know. And when it comes to the restriction of access of information related to national security, it's fine. But what about the information that directly influence Malaysian citizens and their daily life? Now, we'll give you an example. Every year, the Women's Aid Organization, they will obtain a Bukit Aman's crime statistic booklet from the police. However, in 2011, these statistics are being withheld, having been declared as an official secret by the Inspector General of the police. And the NGO is warned not to expose this information to the public. So it is believed that by disclosing this kind of statistic involving domestic abuse that involve women will actually tarnish Malaysia's reputation. And also, we do not see the reason why information such as the air pollution index is also kept as an official secret. So this is why it is important to have a Freedom of Information Act. What's worse, the obsolete law grants excessive powers to government officials to arbitrarily acknowledge every government-related document as official secrets. So we can see that a significant incident is that former Pandan MP Rafizi Ramli was apprehended and charged under OSA due to the leakage of a page of audit report of Satu Malaysia Development Berhad. So according to the Human Rights Society of Malaysia, the implementation of OSA is in contrary to the doctrine of transparency and freedom of information. Consequently, it leads to an incompetent and corrupted government. So my question to you is, are the people ready to succumb to a corrupted government and yet it is still being protected by the legislation? A Freedom of Information Act protects this and can be able to accommodate all these concerns. So by implementing FOIA, we are actually protecting highly confidential government document, but at the same time exposing what the citizens are supposed to know. So this is where we draw the line between confidentiality and transparency. Before I end my speech, I would like to reaffirm our stance, which is FOIA should be implemented for the betterment of future. Thank you.
So good afternoon everyone. As the opposition leader, we hereby take the stance that Malaysia should not implement the Freedom of Information Act. As the Prime Minister has said, Denmark has implemented the FOIA, closing the scope of information to be released to the public. However, are the Prime Minister aware that even in countries in England who has not set the scope, the Minister are able to bring in a ministerial veto motion allowing the Minister to block FOI requests. The most famous example being that of Jack Straw, who blocked the minutes of meetings leading up to decision relating to the Blair government lead to a nation into an illegal war in Iraq being public. So from what I've heard from the Prime Minister, it can be attributed that the publics are able to question the government in whatever subject they want. So imagine how disastrous it would be when stupid questions from the public comes into governmental offices every day like, are the council prepared for dragon attacks? Is the local authority prepared for zombie invasion? And so on. So despite all the fact and evidence that the Prime Minister have given us, they are still obviously more than what they have said. Firstly, the releasing of certain information could jeopardize international relationships. Some certain information that we release may even put our country at risk. An example, the cyber war attack recently in UK that indirectly permitted the threshold opened by the Freedom of Information Act as citizens from other countries believe that they have the right to access information of UK. So other than that, freedom of information would similarly lead to freedom of false information, as publics were able to access and request information of both public and private authority. Yes, transparency of decision-making of public authorities are prioritized. However, as information are easier to be accessed and retrieved, so does your imagination. False information may create its own paradox, defaming the innocent authority as a story passed on from one person to another or throughout the whole Twitter. So, just like Samsung and Apple case, where Samsung were rumored to pay 1 billion judgment to Apple's vehicles, obviously this would have defamed Samsung's company image, as the consumer would possess a bad attribution towards Samsung after reading the news and actually believed it. So what's worse than having two top companies attacking each other in our daily news? Defamation amongst a member of parliament. It is certainly more headache when member of parliament starts to point fingers or even knife at each other after hearing or receiving certain information, misleading news that was passed around in the whole country due to a free flow of information. So Malaysia itself, our former Kuching MP Chong Chen Ying was sued by the Sarawak government over his allegations of disappearing of RM 11,000 billion into a black hole. Therefore, before implementing the FOIA, there should be much more consideration in the procedure and balancing the pros and cons. Clear methodology and procedure should be first considered and drafted, first as FOIA might lead to a chaotic disaster, such as uncontrollable publics. I'm sure that everyone is aware of the news where our Princess Diana was featured by a lookalike model in the advertisement with nothing on but just lingering on. So as a result, her image was badly tainted and we would not want such cases in Malaysia.
POI please.
Yes?
By saying that Malaysia is not ready for FOIA to be enacted, so when? How long does Malaysia have to suffer without the protection of FOIA? Please answer that.
So, Prime Minister, of course it depends on the country itself. If citizens are able to play a more active role in their society, reading news, discussing politics, and finally understanding politics is more than just nudging, I'm very sure that our country will move in very fast. For now, I believe that our country has more to worry rather than implementing FOIA now. So in fact, having the freedom of expression in any media might be a headache as well. I foresee that FOIA is really, if it's really to implement it into Malaysia, that will be more Facebook posts by insulting Tun Dr. Mahathir and far more worse because we cannot do anything about it. So why? Because the publics have the right to do so. For now, I rest my case, but the opposition believe that FOIA should not be implemented because the security and the safety of the people should be the priority of the government. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, members of the floor, I, as the Deputy Prime Minister, will put forth my contention on the advantages of implementing the FOIA Act. One of the advantages of the Freedom of Information Act in Malaysia is the empowerment of our rights. Everyone has the freedom to opinion and expression, and this right includes freedom to hold information and opinions without interference to seek, receive and impart information and ideas through any medium. As taxpayers and voters, citizens are legally entitled to know how the government makes decisions and what information it holds. According to the United Nations, a right to information is a human right. If the public is barred from accessing to information that is classified as private and confidential, our right to information is being infringed. Therefore, the public should be kept knowledgeable about the actions of the government. An example of a case, in December 2008, landslide hit the area just outside Kuala Lumpur, killing 5 people. The cause of this landslide is attributed to leakage in the pipes installed near an abandoned area on the hill slope. 14 years then, another significant tragedy happened in the same district, where a condominium block collapsed, killing 48 people, and the cause of the collapse was structural weakness in the piling. Therefore, it is evident that the public has the right to know about classification of lands and forests, whether or not they have been gazetted, and the safety levels to ensure the safety levels of the citizens. This is to help planning and decision making and ensuring the safety of the citizens. By classifying the report as a secret is infringing the citizens' right to know. Therefore, it is undeniable that there is a significant confidentiality in the law enacted by the government in Malaysia. While the Official Secrets Act, OSA, was intended to protect the country's intelligence and political and military intelligence, its loose definitions have made it too easy for government-related information to be declared a secret. Over the years, there are many things that have been classified as official secrets, namely the Air Pollution Index from 1997 to 2005, sex crime statistics in 2011, local council plans, and last but not least, the 1MDB Auditor General reports. The Freedom Act is also advantageous in the sense that it keeps the government in check and it holds the leaders accountable. It makes politicians drastically more accountable for their actions and dramatically improves government transparency. In general, it is shown that the Official Secrets Act is used as a tool to silence the political opposition. On top of that, the loose definition of this act gives opportunity to any civil servants to declare any document as an official secret. This clearly shows the abuse in the OSA and also the abuse in the power of our political leaders. One of the most obvious examples is Rafizi Ramli, who has been charged with possessing a page and sharing online of a 1MDB audit report without the approval and is sentenced to 18 months jail. But that's not the only case. In 1985, a journalist was charged for reporting on a alleged discrepancy in funding process of a defense contract. In the same year, 2 foreign journalists was fined 10,000 ringgit and expelled from the country for reporting on corruption from then Finance Minister Dain Zainuddin. In fact, in 2011-2016, there have been 28 cases reported under the OSA. This has led to the experts perceiving the law as merely a tool to silence the political opposition. Therefore, with the implementation of FOIA, the media can expose corruption. It can keep a check on public authorities by throwing a spotlight on the government actions and let people voice diverse opinions on governments of the country. Moving on to my second contention, another advantages of the Freedom of Information Act is that there is now an easier mode of spreading information rightfully, so there will not be an issue of information falling into the wrong hands. Hence, the spreading of information will only be received by the person concerned, and this in turn results in easy accessibility. The enactment sets out its limitation in reference to the Official Secrets Act and does not include bodies created by the state or that have a public interest function. This means that private contracts that have a public interest are excluded from this scope of the law. Ironically speaking, the spreading of false information can be controlled with the passing of this FOIA Act. Even with the enactment of this Freedom of Information Act, there will still be a degree of protection from being wrongly informed by certain information. I hope this answers your POI on the release of all information, Madam Opposition Leader. So what have we told you today? We have told you that the freedom of information is necessary for transparency and openness, to fill in loopholes in the current existing acts, to sustain the democratic state of our country, and to hold leaders accountable, and lastly, to empower our rights as Malaysians. Therefore, I would like to reaffirm once again that this House strongly believes that the benefits of the FOIA Act outweighs the disadvantages. With that, I thank you very much.
Hi, very good afternoon. As the Deputy Leader of the Opposition and the last speaker for today's debate, I'll first start with my rebuttals. So firstly, I would like to rebut the Lady Prime Minister's point, which is the FOIA is to ensure that people will know what the government is doing all the time. In this age where technology is so advanced, everyone is becoming more of like the terminology keyboard warrior. What happens is FOIA is implemented and everyone gets hold of what the government of Malaysia is doing, and whether or not they think they're good or bad, nobody would know, and they will start doing their thing on the internet where they start tarnishing the reputation of Malaysia. As like your point, Lady Prime Minister, you have said that revealing the statistics of domestic violence against women will tarnish the reputation of Malaysia. So does this apply to every single issue that is happening with the government of Malaysia as well? In my opinion, I think so. Secondly, your point, you said that the FOIA information that is sensitive or relating to national security will be kept a secret. But information that is sensitive, so the word sensitive, so what does it mean by that? The degree of sensitivity varies from people to people, and it doesn't necessarily mean that what the government thinks is sensitive, it is sensitive to the citizens as well. So what if the government decides that releasing an information about whether nutritious fast food is nutritious for people is actually considered sensitive, but the citizens don't, so the citizens still have the right to know? So right, I'll start with my rebuttals for the Deputy Prime Minister. So you have actually said that the FYI is to keep the government in check and hold the leaders accountable, but there's one country, not to say that it's too far, but it's actually really close to us, called Cambodia. They actually do have this FOIA actually implemented, but they are still ranked 161 out of 180th, the most corrupted country in the world. And Cambodia governmental bodies and judicial legal sector are still rife with corruption. Does this explain the benefits does actually outweigh the disadvantages of implementing FOIA in this society? So first, I'll now start with my own points. So, the implementation of FOIA actually poses a threat to national security, and why do I say that? Because if FOIA is implemented, the illegal things such as black market and WikiLeaks will then become legal. So what is black market actually? So black market is an economic activity that takes place outside of government sanctioned channels such as dark webs, like the Silk Road and Alpha Bay. So Alpha Bay, it is reigning top market with 50,000 listings of drugs and chemicals for sale and 12,000 fraud products like stolen online accounts and credit cards. So if FOIA is actually implemented, have you guys actually thought that all of these illegal things will actually become legal and that it would actually pose a threat to national security? So sales of stolen credentials in a way will actually increase crime rate, which is also a threat to national security. And WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks actually do contain highly confidential governmental documents, but then Julian Assange created this platform to release the secret documents. And then this has already actually poses a threat to national security. And why do I say that? Because during the 2016 US presidential election campaign, WikiLeaks released emails and other documents from the Democratic National Committee and from Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, John Podesta. These releases are the contributing factor to her loss. Actually, all of this information that is released by WikiLeaks will actually pose a threat to national security, because what if they actually do release information that's highly sensitive and should be highly confidential in order to protect the welfare of the citizens? So for my last point today is, the FOIA should be implemented later and not now, because Malaysia is still a rather young democracy and honestly our citizens are not ready for this. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no need for FOIA when there's already an increasing number of treaties, of agreements and work programs being adopted on a global scale. For example, Article 10 and Article 13 of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption together encourage countries to improve public access to information, and that's why there is no need for FOIA. And with now I rest my case, but as the Deputy Leader of the Opposition together with the Leader, we strongly believe that the FOIA should not be implemented because the safety and security of the people and the country should be the priority of the government. Thank you.
The debate for today. Firstly, a very detailed introduction of the Freedom of Information Act was provided. The Freedom of Information Act is the right of free speech of any medium. Most people refer to this act as the right to know the inner workings of the government, pertaining information that can either be beneficial or detrimental to the people. In Malaysia, the Freedom of Information Act is fairly new, as it was only established after the shocking win of Pakatan Harapan led by Tun Dr. Mahathir. Currently, the Freedom of Information Act has been established in Selangor and Penang. Nur Izzah stated the reason why this act must be established is to return democracy into Malaysia, whereby the press can freely report and the people can know what the government is doing at all times. Secondly, the Act promotes transparency, in which the public servants and the government will be held accountable should anything go wrong. This increases the confidence of the public towards their government. Thirdly, the Freedom of Information Act can help fill in the gaps and loopholes of other acts such as the Whistleblower Protection Act, the Witness Protection Act, and the Anti-Fake News Act. Now, a look into the advantages of the Freedom of Information Act. In 1999, the Commonwealth Law Ministers came together and stated that the Freedom of Information Act is a guaranteed right, allowing the people access to information held by the executive, legislative, judiciary, and the public servants. In Malaysia context, the Freedom of Information Act is advantageous because it allows the people the freedom of opinion and expression, as well as the right to information broadcasted by the media and the government. Such examples include the air pollution report, sex crime statistics, and recently the 1MDB scandal. Secondly, the Act again will hold the government accountable should their decisions-making lead the people astray and cause more harm than good. A prominent example was the previous government's excessive use of the Official Secrets Act, which was used to silence anyone that questioned them. Such example was Rafizi Ramli, who was sentenced to 18 months in prison because he published a page of the 1MDB audit. Thirdly, the Freedom of Information Act will allow the free flow of information through the appropriate channels. Consecutively, the Act will also ensure that the information being accessed by the public is valid and not tainted with lies and deceit. Now, from a contradicting side, the Freedom of Information Act was viewed as being able to jeopardize international relationships and national security through cyber attacks from countries such as Russia and North Korea. Secondly, it encourages the black market to continually progress through illegal transactions such as Silk Road. The validity of information was also questioned through the Apple-Samsung case, Hillary Clinton's leaked emails through WikiLeaks, and MP Chong Chin-jen's rift with the Malaysian government. The application of the Act in other countries was also touched upon. In America, even though the Act was established, corporate information, medical information, and government information is still withheld. In Australia, transparency is not promoted because the public cannot view cabinet discussions, and in England, ministers still have the right to refuse freedom of information requests. Based on the points presented by the government and the opposition, it is clear that the pros clearly outweigh the cons. Although the opposition presented a strong argument against the implementation of the Freedom of Information Act, they did not further discuss it in the Malaysian context and only provided very few examples. The government, besides talking about the advantages, also stressed on the necessity of the Act when it comes to Malaysia due to the long history of allegations and corruption. Currently, Malaysia is ranked 62 out of 179 in the Transparency International Corruption Perception Index, the worst in recent years as told by the Singapore Straits Times. Therefore, this Act must be further implemented to resolve the various issues that remained stagnant during the previous government. The first is end the blocking of news sites. During the 1MDB scandal, news sites such as Malaysian Insider and the Sarawak Report were promptly blocked, thus preventing people from gaining information regarding the scandal. Secondly, repeal laws violating the freedom of expression. Now, acts such as the Sedition Act and the Anti-Fake News Act must be reviewed to ensure the safeguarding of freedom of expression in the country. Thirdly, use the Freedom of Information Act to strengthen other legislation such as the National Human Rights Commission of Malaysia. Therefore, this House believes that the Freedom of Information Act must be implemented in all states and not just Penang and Selangor. Thank you.